Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today we are going to present our materials about analysis of English variation. But before we come to presentation session, let me introduce me and my friend. The first is
My name is Uswati Rosma. My number student 21.
my name is Salvian Raka Adi Pratama and my student number is 25.
And my name is Fatah Halim Masrifi, and my student number is 26.
And my name is Muhammad Takyuddin Ahlisham. My last three number from NIM is 027.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming along this evening, and I would also like to extend my respects to my Gadigal brothers and sisters from my people, the Wiradjuri people. In the winter of 2015, Australia turned to face itself. It looked into its soul and it had to ask this question: who are we? What sort of country do we want to be? And this happened in a place that is most holy, most sacred to Australians. It happened on the sporting field, it happened on the football field. Suddenly the front page was on the back page, it was in the grandstands. Thousands of voices rose to hound an Indigenous man, a man who was told he was an Australian, a man who was told he was an Australian of the Year. And they hounded that man into submission. I can't speak for what lay in the hearts of the people who booed Adam Goodes, but I can tell you what we heard when we heard those boos. We heard a sound that was very familiar to us. We heard a howl. We heard a howl of humiliation that echoes across 2 centuries of dispossession, injustice, suffering, and survival. We heard the howl of the Australian dream, and it said to us again, "You're not welcome." The Australian dream. We sing of it and we recite it in verse. Australians all, let us rejoice, for we are young and free. My people die young in this country. We die 10 years younger than average Australians, and we are far from free. We are fewer than 3% of the Australian population, and yet we are 25%, a quarter of those Australians, locked up in our prisons. And if you are a juvenile, it is worse, it is 50%. An Indigenous child is more likely to be locked up in prison than they are to finish high school. I love a sunburned country, a land of sweeping plains, of rugged mountain ranges. Reminds me that my people were killed on those plains. We were shot on those plains. Disease ravaged us on those plains. I come from those plains. I come from a people west of the Blue Mountains, the Wiradjuri people, where in the 1820s the soldiers and settlers waged a war of extermination against my people. Yes, a war of extermination. That was the language used at the time. Go to the Sydney Gazette and look it up and read about it. Martial law was declared and my people could be shot on sight. Those rugged mountain ranges, my people, women and children, were herded over those ranges to their deaths. The Australian dream. The Australian dream is rooted in racism. It is the very foundation of the dream. It is there at the birth of the nation. It is there in terra nullius, an empty land, a land for the taking. 60,000 years of occupation. A people who made the first seafaring journey in the history of mankind. A people of law, a people of lore, L-O-R-E, a people of music and art and dance and politics. None of it mattered because our rights were extinguished because we were not here according to British law. And when British people looked at us, they saw something subhuman, and if we were human at all, we occupied the lowest rung on civilization's ladder. We were fly-blown Stone Age savages, and that was the language that was used. Charles Dickens, the great writer of the age, when referring to the noble savage of which we were counted among, said it would be better that they be wiped off the face of the earth. Captain Arthur Phillip, a man of enlightenment, a man who was instructed to make peace with the so-called natives in a matter of years, was sending out raiding parties with the instruction, bring back the severed heads of the black troublemakers. They were smoothing the dying pillow. My people were rounded up and put on missions from where, if you escaped, you were hunted down, you were roped and tied and dragged back. And it happened here. It happened on the mission that my grandmother and my great-grandmother are from at Warringezda on the Darling Point at the Murrumbidgee River. Read about it. It happened. By 1901, when we became a nation, when we federated the colonies, we were nowhere. We're not in the Constitution, save for race provisions, which allowed for laws to be made that would take our children, that would invade our privacy, that would tell us who we could marry and tell us where we could live, the Australian dream. By 1963, the year of my birth, the dispossession was continuing. Police came at gunpoint, under cover of darkness, to Mapoon, an Aboriginal community in Queensland, and they ordered people from their homes, and they burned those homes to the ground, and they gave the land to a bauxite mining company, and today those people remember that as the night of the burning. In 1963, when I was born, I was counted among the flora and fauna, not among the citizens of this country. Now, you will hear things tonight, you will hear people say, but you've done well. Yes, I have. And I'm proud of it. And why have I done well? I've done well because of who has come before me. My father, who lost the tips of 3 fingers working in sawmills to put food on our table because he was denied an education. My grandfather, who served to fight wars for this country when he was not yet a citizen and came back to a segregated land where he couldn't even share a drink with his digger mates in the pub because he was black. My great-grandfather, who was jailed for speaking his language to his grandson, my father, jailed for it. My grandfather on my mother's side, who married a white woman who reached out to Australia, lived on the fringes of town until the police came, put a gun to his head, bulldozed his tin humpy and ran over the graves of the 3 children he buried there. That's the Australian dream. I have succeeded in spite of the Australian dream, not because of it, and I've succeeded because of those people. You might hear tonight, but you have white blood in you. And if the white blood in me was here tonight, my grandmother, she would tell you of how she was turned away from a hospital giving birth to her first child because she was giving birth to the child of a black person. The Australian dream. We're better than this. I have seen the worst of the world as a reporter. I spent a decade in war zones from Iraq to Afghanistan and Pakistan. We are an extraordinary country. We are in so many respects the envy of the world. If I was sitting here where my friends are tonight, I would be arguing passionately for this country. But I stand here with my ancestors and the view looks very different from where I stand. The Australian dream. We have our heroes. Albert Namatjira painted the soul of this nation. Vincent Lingiari put his hand out for Gough Whitlam to pour the sand of his country through his fingers and say, "This is my country." Kathy Freeman lit the torch for the Olympic Games, but every time we are lured into the light, we are mugged by the darkness of this country's history. Of course racism is killing the Australian dream. It is self-evident that it's killing the Australian dream. But we are better than that. The people who stood up and supported Adam Goodes and said no more, they are better than that. The people who marched across the bridge for reconciliation, they are better than that. The people who supported Kevin Rudd when he said sorry to the stolen generations, they are better than that. My children and their non-Indigenous friends are better than that. My wife, who is non-Indigenous, is better than that. And one day I want to stand here and be able to say as proudly and sing as loudly as anyone else in this room, Australians all, let us rejoice. Thank you.
Pronunciation difference. British English and Australian English are the most common when it comes to both pronunciation and grammar. Bear in mind that Australia was colonized 200 years later than the USA, resulting in a cultural similarity between in it and British English as opposite to American English, which developed and more different pronunciation and spelling. When looking at the significant differences between Australian English and British English, we will see the following. British and Australian English tend to have softer R as compared to American accent that pronounce the R such as R, which has a hard R sound in the American English pronunciation and sound in the Australian and UK accent. If you are wondering if there will be a difference if we look at British English versus Australian English, then the answer is yes. The Australian accent tends to elongate the A, such as far being pronounced far in Australian and far in the UK. Australian usually swap their TS with TPS. An example of this is better, being pronounced better in the UK and better in Australia. In Australia and British English, the T is typically pronounced is while it is just pronounced as a T sound in the USA. An example of this is YouTube being pronounced YouTube. In the UK and Australia, well, it is simply pronounced as YouTube in the USA. Another difference between British and American English versus Australian English is how they pronounce their own sounds, with Americans often more on the sound. An example of this is the word "sorry" being pronounced "sorry." In the UK and Australia, we found this idea compared to the USA that pronounce it as "sorry." Another significant difference between the accent is language. Countries pronounce their own tone as the end of itself in the UK and Australia, and all is replaced by a fractal in France compared to the harmonic tone used in the USA, with the accent in the USA known. It will be pronounced as known. While in the UK and Italian, the word "no" is pronounced "neo" in the UK and "ne" in Australia.
Spelling differences. British or Australian English is quite similar regarding the spelling of words as opposites to American English when it comes to spelling. When comparing the spelling of all previously mentioned dialects, we can observe the following of looking at British English versus American English. Spelling or American English versus Australian English, the main differences are as follows. Australian British English spelling, adopting an S like organize, analyze, or American English spelling, adopting Z like organize and analyze, adopting our in color and favor. In American English spelling is adopting or as color and favor. Uh, in Australian British English spelling, adopting double O, like traveling. Or American English spelling is adopting L, traveling.
Okay, slang is an essential part of language that reflects regional and cultural identity. It adds color, humor, and personality to communication. Today we will explore the slang words and expression of British, Australian, and American English. British English slang has deep cultural roots and it's often influenced by expat groups and pop culture. There are some examples. Quit. Quit is mean British fault. And dodgy is suspicious or unreliable. And bevy is a drink, often alcoholic. And a cuppa, a cube of tea. And bloody used for emphasize meaning too much. And proper, an alternative to very or extremely. For example, you might say, this is a proper dodgy deal. And for American English slang, is widely known due to the influence of media and pop culture. Here are some examples. Awesome is wonderful. Cool is great or fantastic. And whatever is to show indifference or no limits. And to hang out is to spend time with someone and to drop by to visit unexpectedly. For example, you might hear, let's hang out at the mall. It will be awesome. And the last is Australian English slang. It's unique of words. Here are some common examples. Awful is afternoon and brekkie is breakfast and Barbie is barbecue and bogan is someone on sophisticated and Australia is Australia. Australian also use playful abbreviation like the fall for devastated or reload or relative. For example, you might hear we are having a Bobby this awful. While each type of slang has unique characteristics, there are some similarities. Both British and Australian slang use bloody for emphasize and mate for describe a friend. Australian slang is characterized by, by witty abbreviation like awful or breaky, while British slang often retains traditional phrases. American slangs, on other hand, is trendy and shaped by pop culture, making it globally recognized. Only adds flavor to language, but also highlight the cultural diversity of English-speaking countries. By understanding slang, we can better connect with native speakers and appreciate their cultural expressions.
Conclusion. In conclusion, while the accents share a common linguistic heritage, the Australian accent stands out with its relaxed and distinct vowel shapes, making it unique from more formal British accent and the dynamics rhotic American accent. And that's enough from our presentation. And that's all. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.